All right, all right. This is an exciting day, everyone. And we got to start with our lovely money dance. It's NFA Money Dance time. Woo-hoo. All right. Today is an awesome day because we have Dr. John Demartini here. And I'm certain that all of you have definitely heard of him through me because he is who I attribute to being my main mentor who helped me go from food stamps to building a six-figure business fast. I actually had the awesome pleasure of getting to hang out with him in his hotel room on my birthday a couple years ago. And at the time, I was newer in business and, I'd done his Demartini method, so training, and I've gone to lots of his workshops. He's a person that I attribute to just being one of those people who has massively changed my life through helping me think completely differently and be just a different person, really. The first time, I don't really know if you remember this, Dr. Demartini, but the first time I went to an event of yours, it was in Denver and it was in this hotel conference room. And I went and I had like a notepad kind of like this. I always carry notepads around and I took 20 pages of notes. And I remember sitting there thinking, why have I never heard this information before? And where has this guy been all my life? And I was just so psyched. And I ended up coming up with money. I was on food stamps. And I remember asking, it was actually Elena, his daughter. I said, like, do you give scholarships? How can I get into this workshop you're doing? It was the breakthrough experience that weekend. And she said, no, you'll come up with the money. You both said to me, no, you'll figure it out, Amanda. Like, if you want to be there, you'll figure it out. And I did. I got very resourceful. I came up with at the time, it was around $2,000. I remembered that I had this loan money through school that I hadn't accessed yet. And I came up with the money and I was there because I knew I had to absolutely be there. And since then, I've sent lots of people to his breakthrough experience. I became a facilitator, and just this work is some of the most powerful work you will ever experience in your life. So welcome to the show, Dr. Demartini. It is awesome to have you here.
Well, thank you. It's great to be with you. So
yeah,
we get to rendezvous again.
Yes, I love getting to rendezvous with you. All right, we have a couple comments coming in. So Jose says, hello, looking forward to the show today. Thanks for being here, everyone. And just to let you know, as we go through the show today, feel free to put questions in. We might not answer them exactly at the moment, but put your questions in and we'll answer them as we go along. Something I always ask people, Dr. Demartini, is a money block that they worked through as they built their business. So could you recall, I know this was quite a long time ago because you've been in business for a long time. Can you think when you started building your business, what were some of the money fears you had around building a business and making more money in your life?
Well, I was very naive and quite illiterate when it comes to money when I started my main business. And I was in debt, and I was overwhelmed by a debt, and I didn't know how I was going to get out of this debt. And I was under the treadmill for a while. It wasn't drastic. It wasn't like, really devastating. It was just not what I was expecting. I came out of school and boom, all of a sudden I've got debt. And then I had a lady working for me who worked for me for 3 weeks. I just finished training her. It was the second person I ever hired. And she went to Las Vegas on a weekend, met a guy, got married, came back and wanted her paycheck in advance. If I paid her, I wouldn't get to pay me. And I was like, oh. And I was into, sort of an altruistic idea of being nice to everybody. And then I sat there that night. I'm just, excuse the word, but I was bitching to myself at the time. And I said, I just paid somebody that's only been there 3 weeks. I'm the most important person in the business. Otherwise, it's not there. And I'm paying myself last. Something's backwards. And I made a decision at that moment that I was going to start paying myself. And I didn't know what I could afford. So I figured $1 an hour, $10 a day, $50 a week, $200 a month. So I made a commitment to go from my bank account to this discount broker and put money over into this money market account that was earning about 5% at the time. And I did it electronically, so there's no emotion. And I just started to do that. And I just felt like a lifting occurring. And at the end of that month, when it happened, I didn't miss it. And I did that for 3 months. and I had $600 saved. And then I said, you know what? I'm comfortable already again. I want to make it 300. And 3 months later, I made it 500. And 3 months later, I made it 750. And 3 months later, I made it 1,000. I'm going to hit $1,000. I ran a projection. If I saved $1,000 a month, where would I be in 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, 50 years? And I thought, it's going to take me 34 years to be a millionaire. But I didn't stop at that. I made a commitment that I was going to increase it 10% every quarter. And I was going to figure out how to deal with that, even if I had to delegate or had to, work harder or whatever. And I started incrementing 1,100, 1,210, 1,344, 1,056 or whatever. And I went to 2,000 and 4,000 and 8,000, 16,000, 32,000, 64,000, $128,000 a month it went to. And I never even imagined that could happen. But when you start to manage money wisely, you receive more money to manage. And it was amazing. I got financially independent way before I thought I would ever do when I started. And I just kept delegating things, prioritizing things, sticking to the highest priority things. And I learned that unless I value myself, don't expect the world to. Unless I pay myself first, don't expect my clients to. Unless money circulates through the economy from those who value at least to those who value most. So I had to value serving people, deal with fair exchange, and saving it to make my business more efficient. And my business went from a low percentage I could save to 50% of my gross income was going into investments. And that was after taxes. It was amazing. So I never thought I could do that when I started, but I just did it. And I can just tell people, don't wait till you get extra to start saving and investing money. When you start to do it and value yourself, more money comes to you. It's a really amazing experience.
Yeah, you teach this in your book, How to Make One Hell of a Profit and Still Get to Heaven. And after I went to that initial breakthrough experience, I did exactly your method. So I read that book. I changed on my value system to wealth building. And I was like, well, because everyone teaches, don't start saving until you get out of debt. You got to pay off your debt first. And then no one starts the habit of saving. And at the time, I had not enough income to pay off my student loans and also save. So I thought, okay, I'm just going to do this. And it was I started with $20 a week. It was it was $20 a month. But I said, okay, I'm going to save $20 a month. And I started putting the $20, and I did exactly what you said. Every quarter, I increased it by 10%, and I just kept doing it. And it accelerated so quickly. And I was able to go off of food stamps. And, then my money, I noticed in my business, money started to come in. And then I started to be able to invest money. And then I built up that 6-month account, where I always had money in my account, and I called it my money magnet account. And I just did exactly your strategy, and it worked so beautifully. So everyone here, go read Dr. Demartini's book, How to Make One Hell of a Profit and Still Get to Heaven. Awesome book with really practical, actionable strategies in there. I love this. And you said, manage money wisely and you'll receive more money to manage. I know you sometimes talk about law of attraction, and I know values is your thing that to me is what blew my mind when I heard it. It really made me realize at any point in time, you can change your trajectory just by choosing to live within different values and design your life around your value system. So will you talk about what your value system is? Because I know a lot of people confuse it with like honesty and integrity, and that's not what we're talking about. So will you give kind of the 101 breakdown of values?
Yeah, every human being, regardless of gender, spectrum, or age, or culture background, lives moment by moment by a set of priorities, a set of values, things that are most to least important to them. Some people have a very high value on their children and family. Some have a very high value on business, and some people have a value on social causes, some in health. There is no right or wrong value system out there. Although anybody that matches yours, you're going to think is good, and anybody that doesn't, you're going to think is bad. But that's not true. It's just the whole world is needed. Every value system is needed. So what you value most is where you put your intrinsic, spontaneous actions and where you achieve most. And so if you look carefully at where on that hierarchy of values you have money and wealth building, it's eye-opening, because the hierarchy of your values will dictate your financial destiny. And so you tell me where money is, wealth building is on that list, and I'll tell you what you're going to do. Whatever's highest, you're always going to have money for. Whatever's lowest, you're going to not have money for. So if you don't have a value on wealth building and serving people and generating and managing an efficient business, not likely to be very wealthy. I was speaking at a church one time and I said, and it was really shocking to everybody. People just froze for a second. If you're poor, it's because you don't care about humanity. And it went, what? I said, because if you cared about human beings, you would find out what their needs are and do what you could to be of service to them and directly or indirectly find a way of providing their needs, serving their needs, and doing it in a sustainable, fair exchange. And all of a sudden people go, oh, tell us more about that now. And they realize that there's no limit on what we can do financially because there's no limit on what we can do to serve people. All we have to do is care.
Will you share? This is awesome because I often think about being impoverished is a disease of it'd be similar to if you didn't feed your body well and your body was falling apart and sick, you're not expressing the healthiest value in terms of taking care of your body. So it's like, okay, let's shift. Let's say you're poor, like I was when I was on food stamps and I met you. It was like, okay, I've got to shift my value system to wealth building so that I can raise my value on wealth in order to focus on being a master of my financial destiny. So I raised it in my hierarchy of values to the top. And at the time, it wasn't anywhere on my value list at all. And it was like, oh, well, no wonder I'm poor. I never even had the thought I need to read a book about money to understand how to be a money master. So will you share with people if let's say money is nowhere on their value system right now, what would you have them do to shift their values toward wealth building?
Well, it doesn't have to be the top one. I met a lot of billionaires, a lot of centimillionaires in the hundreds now. And I've done interviews and, determine what values they have because I was curious. And I can't say that they all have financial wealth building at the very top. But I found that I haven't met anybody that's financially independent that doesn't have it in the top 4.
Mm-hmm.
That's my experience. So if you don't have a value on it, you won't study it, you won't learn about it, you won't read about it, you won't apply it, you won't do anything because whatever's highest on your value, you spontaneously do. Whatever's lower on your value, you need motivation to. You need to be reminded to do it. So you're not going to get around to doing it if it's low on your values. So if somebody has a very low value on it, they haven't even identified it on their value list, what they do is take what is truly important to them and what they don't want to change that they know is important to them and start asking a simple question, because the quality of your life is basically quite the questions you're asking. How specifically is doing the action steps that have proven to build wealth, how specifically is it going to help me fulfill what's highest on my value currently, or second highest, or third highest? And start stacking up the general benefits and advantages of doing those action steps that are proven to build wealth. And then the specific links of how those actions will help you fulfill what is currently highest on your value that you don't want to change. Maybe it's your children. So you're asking, how is building wealth going to help you with the management and raising a family and being with your children? Could it be possibly it's going to increase the probability of an education? Could it be that it's going to allow you to have a higher quality environment? Could it be more tutoring? I don't know. But what it is, if you can raise and link it to what's highest on your value, and write general benefits of having and building the actions, but don't write down the benefits of me building wealth is I can spend it more, because then you're just going to have a higher value on spending it. And most people don't realize, when I ask thousands of people how many want to be financially independent, everybody puts their hand up. But when I actually get down to what they mean by that, most of them mean spending money on lifestyles of the rich and famous, instead of actually methodically deferring gratification and investing in asset accumulation, where eventually passive income exceeds active income and you crescendo in your future financially. So you have to have the benefits of building wealth, the action steps, which means taking a portion of whatever you earn and putting it into asset accumulation, making sure that you are dedicated to more effective and efficiently serving people, and looking at how you can serve in a competitive way and at a fair price, and make sure that you're thinking, how can I reach more people and serve ever greater numbers of people? And how can I manage my business more effectively and efficiently to maximize profits? How can I accelerate my savings? How could I leverage the wealth building by investing in ever greater degrees of leverage and higher quality investments? And if you study those and apply those and start to implement those, it changed my life. And I have thousands of students that have done the same thing. It's not anything to me. I used to live on the streets myself. I lived in a tent when I was 17, 18 years old, and lived on the streets and was a panhandler when I was a teenager. So it had nothing to do with where you start or what you've been through or what you're going through. It's just a matter of, are you now going to apply the principles that have stood the test of time that move people from working their life for money as a slave to having money work for it as a master?
It's I love that you say that because it's so I've been so intrigued after getting to know you and all the things I've gotten to do in the world since, and just go, it's like the magic formula. To me, values is a magic formula where we make things very complicated instead of just recognizing that we're always going to have our life be determined by our value system, and that it's actually pretty easy to change it when you choose to. Like you were saying, for me, I moved it up for a period of time to wealth building being my top, and I changed my financial reality, and now it's in the top 4. And I teach people how to do that. And I'm curious, you've worked with thousands of people all over the world. What do you think holds people back the most from discovering their value system and understanding how to utilize it in a way to expand to their fullest potential?
Well, many people compare themselves to other people
Mhm.
instead of comparing their own actions to what they value most. I was just having dinner last night with a 2-time gold medalist in swimming, and we were talking about this very action last night, that if he was to stand up and about to go into the water for the gold medal, if he looked to the left or right at his opponents, he will never get the medal. He has to look steady at his goal, rehearse it in his mind thousands of times, and then go on autopilot, and don't even distract yourself by who's next to you. And because the second you compare yourself to others and put them above you or below you, you've just lost your authenticity. Because if you put them above you, you'll minimize yourself. Put them below you, you'll exaggerate yourself. And whenever you minimize or exaggerate yourself, you'll be emotionally unstable and you won't be yourself. And it's your real self that's got the worth. It's your real self that's the one that's magnificent. It's the real self that's got creativity, original thinking, and cares about other people in an equitable and objective way. So you don't want to compare yourself to others, because if you do, if you put them on a pedestal, you'll inject their values into your life, cloud the clarity of your own, and confuse yourself and devalue yourself. And then you won't feel worthy of having wealth, or you won't believe that you have something to offer people. You won't be an entrepreneur. You won't leverage it. If you're working for others, you're going to pay the most in taxes. You work for yourself, you're going to pay less in taxes. If you invest and have your passive income earning over long periods of time with deferred taxation, you pay the least amount of taxes. I mean, it's almost like the government is giving us the opportunity to value ourselves if we realize it. And so it's about not comparing yourself to others. It's comparing your daily actions to what you value most. And if you have a value in wealth building, and then you learn the action steps that lead you there, and you just do a checklist on that and make sure it's automated. Automation towards wealth building is simple. I've taken people that never thought they could build wealth, sat with them for 3 hours, and shifted their values, and went over to the investment company with them, have them sign the paperwork. Took 15 minutes, 20 minutes, and their life changed. And I just had a gentleman last night. I was doing a presentation last night. He said, 8 years ago, I never even thought I could be financially independent. 8 years later, I am financially independent. He says, and it's because I applied the values. I learned about the values. I learned about where wealth was on it. I restructured it. I automated it. I went out and served people, and my life changed.
It sounds so simple, right?
Well, it does. What's interesting is we make it complex.
Yeah.
Charlie Munger, I met Charlie Munger, and Charlie Munger said something on one of his little videos online that I hope people can find. And he said that the Wall Street was never meant for the average person to get wealthy from. Wall Street was designed for Wall Street to get wealthy. And it wasn't necessarily the most scrupulous place for helping people in their wealth. And he said that they wanted to make sure it was complex and seem complex, because that way people would give away their decision making to other people, who would then partake in using that money and building their own wealth. And not that all people are, that way, but there are a good percentage of them there. And I've spoken to a lot of the places there in New York, so I'm not just making this out of in my head. I know for a fact this is true.
Yeah.
So what's interesting, it's actually simple, and Munger said it's so simple what Warren does and what he does, and what they recommend for the average person, just buying an index fund and just keep buying and be a net buyer and never stop. If you just did that alone, you'd be amazed what can happen in your finances with compound interest, the eighth wonder of the world. But it's so simple that people don't believe it's possible.
Yeah.
What I do is so simple. I put my daughter on that thing, and she's now on her way to being financially independent. I put thousands of students on this, and you've done the same thing, and you're on your way. It is not rocket science. It does not have to be. It's so simple. I could show you in 15 to 20 minutes some of the things to do, and if you just go and do it, it changes your life. That's how simple it can be. It doesn't have to be complex.
Yeah. Well, will you share a little bit? I mean, because I know Demartini method in and of itself is, to me, a formula for changing anything in your mind. And I use it so much now in my brain that it's just like instantly, if I have a charge on something, I just turn it around and I practice different columns of your method. And very quickly I can pivot my thinking. So will you give, people that are watching a key takeaway in terms of a fast mindset switch strategy? Because that's really how I think about the Demartini method. You're changing yourself from the inside out, and you're changing the way that you perceive things that have happened to you. So let's say somebody's had a big financial loss and they need to perceive it in their mind in order to see the benefits and drawbacks. What can they ask themselves to shift that in their brain really quickly?
Well, the first thing is, if you infatuate with money, you're going to fear its loss.
Oof.
Just like if you infatuate with a relationship, you're going to fear its loss. In the Book of Wealth by Hubert L. Bancroft, one of the great texts in the world, that I was blessed to be able to get a copy of, he said that one of the things that led to great wealth is the transcendence to the amygdala's emotional morality around money. Our objective center, our executive center, sees money as a means of exchange and as a measurement of service rendered, and caring about yourself and people. But the emotions of the amygdala are, if I have money, I'll be happy. If I don't, I'll be sad. It's really attached like a prey predator thing, and it's like an addictive, I've got to have it. If without it, I die kind of mentality. And Munger was addressing this too. He said it's like a locker room of a bunch of football players that have to win, and if they don't have it, they're devastated. So the more you infatuate with money and not appreciate and love money, there's a difference. The more you're going to fear its loss. And the more you're going to be subjectively blind to the fluctuations that happen in the markets. And the more you resent money, the more you're going to try to avoid it. And so anybody that infatuates with money or resents money and has strong emotions about money can't manage money. Warren Buffett says that you can manage your emotions, don't expect to manage money. It has to be an objective thing. That's why I just set up on electronic automatics. It's just done. I don't have to think about it. I just go care about people and serve. The rest of it's electronically done. I've done that for 40 years. So as long as you have an emotion about it, you're going to have it. So if somebody thinks they've lost money, like there's some people right now think they've lost money in market cycles. If the market is above the mean, there's a thing called a mean, which is an average. If it's above the mean, that means that the money you put in the past has made you money. When it goes below the mean, it means that the money you're going to put in there now is going to make you money in the future. So when it goes below the mean, it's money for the future. When it goes above the mean, it's money of the past. But if you average it and don't worry about that, just focus on the mean and have an expectation it's an average, and just keep putting money in, the dollar cost averaging will give you money. And you won't label it, I lost money, I gained money. You'll just see that it's the fluctuations are temporary emotions and biases in the society's thinking about money. And you're going to get the average and just keep focused on the average. So stabilizing your perception with an objective, realistic expectation on the outcome of investing is very smart. And thinking long term. If you look at the vicissitudes of a temporary week or month, you're going to be all over the place. And if you don't sell, you didn't lose anything. It's just paper. It's just going to fluctuate. But if you thought you lost money, what you do with the Demartini method is you ask, what now is coming into my life that's of equal value? And what's the benefit of the new form? And what would have been the drawback if I had not had that experience? And then what is the benefit of that form that it's in now? If you stack it up and don't stop until you get a tear of gratitude, you will stabilize yourself. You won't have the emotions. You won't be externally run by vicissitudes of finance, and you'll be stable, and you will immediately, in that state, re-manifest money. I've seen this and I've taught this, and it blows people's mind. Because now I learned from a gentleman named Mr. Wood, Bill Wood, many years ago, almost 40 years ago. He said, until you can have no emotion about the fluctuations of money, you don't really own that. And what that means is until you have about 10 million, you're not a millionaire. Until you have a million, you're not a centithousandaire, 100,000. So you can handle about 10% fluctuations without emotion. And once you have 10 times the amount, you then, whatever that amount is what you really are. So when I hit 10 million, I was a millionaire. When I hit 100 million, I was a decamillionaire. So that allows me then to, not have emotional swings.
Yeah.
So you have to, that's why it's so important to have a cushion of cash to stop the emotions and allow yourself to not buy or sell when there's a fluctuation, but just keep investing.
Yeah, well, let's map this onto entrepreneurship, because something I see for entrepreneurs is a lot of emotional volatility in their perception of whether their business is successful or not. So, as you were talking, I was just thinking exactly how this relates to the fluctuation of emotions and the perceptions when people are building businesses. And that's what makes the difference between successful entrepreneurs and unsuccessful entrepreneurs. So will you give 3 tips to, let's say, pre-6-figure entrepreneurs who are looking to break through to 6 figures, 7 figures, whatever market is? What are 3 practical, words of wisdom, advice that you have for them in building a successful business?
Identify everything that you're doing in a day and identify what it produces per hour and prioritize that list, and then go and do the very highest priority things that produce the most income, and delegate everything else gradually to somebody else. That's 1. Number 2, automate the forced savings. First, the cushion account. So you have a cushion account of at least 6 months. Then force your automated investments. So there's no question, it's automated, it's going in at a fixed amount or a percentage, whichever greater. Don't ever go below the fixed amount or percentage, whichever greater. If you have a big month, put extra in. And then keep delegating and prioritizing so you can do more effective production, and keep accelerating the savings, whether you think you can do it or not. Because the worst that can happen is you got the money, you can always pay your bills with it, but just do it. Just accelerate. I did it 10% every quarter, and that meant it doubled every 2 years. And that led me to amazing transformation financially. And then have a cause that's so inspiring to you that you want to make sure you're saving and building wealth for that. And don't raise your lifestyle. If you raise your lifestyle, don't raise your lifestyle unless you raise your savings and taxes equal amounts. Automate your taxes, automate your savings and investments. And then make sure that you have inside your mind a cause that you want to go and do something with this money, something that's so meaningful that you won't want to spend it on some immediate gratifying capacity. Don't raise your lifestyle unless you raise your savings and taxes equal amounts. That was a very powerful thing. And as an entrepreneur, don't live in a fantasy that with a false attribution bias that what the market needs. Go and find out what the market needs so there's a demand for your services. And keep a cushion, no less than 6 months of cash on reserve. I guarantee you, you'll think you're losing money because you could be investing it, but you'll stabilize your primary business, which will make you more money than secondary businesses at first. Stabilize your business with cash reserve. The top 100 companies in the world have 50% to 100% of a year's income in saved reserves. They stabilize their business so they don't have emotions, because emotions cause volatility to business.
Mm-hmm. This is brilliant. Yeah, I want to add this here. So stabilize your business through cash reserve, not reserver. It's funny to type and do this at the same time. Everyone will know what I mean by that. Yeah, this is fascinating to watch real time, because I did exactly what you're saying through listening to you and reading your books. And as I was building up my wealth in both my personal account, I had a money magnet account, and then I had in my business, same thing. And then, as I started to invest in certain things, I let my money magnet account, I put it into investments, and then I watched more volatility in my money. And it's been amazing to watch and go like, oh no, stay living in the principles of always having that account because of that stability. Similarly, I tell people when they're transitioning into entrepreneurship, don't just take a leap unless you have a reserve, because your brain will go into, I just think of it as fear freak out mode. Yeah, you go into survival, and then you're too afraid and you make decisions. And in that way, will you talk a little bit? I know that you talk about, I know the way you've been talking about it is like manifesting. Let's talk about manifesting in terms of having emotional stability versus volatility. Will you talk about how that causes different ways of magnetizing money your way when you're in freak out mode versus attraction mode?
Well, anytime you're elated, proud, cocky, and think you're successful, you depurpose, because you have what is called a licensing effect, and you give yourself permission to do low priority things. And anytime you're feeling like a failure and down and everything else, you have a repurposing reflex, part of the licensing effect also, that gives you a prioritization. It says, let's go back to high priorities. So if you don't have a mission, some mission to focus on, it's easy to be swayed by the illusions of success and failure. People ask me when I get an interview a lot, oh, how did you become successful? I said, I don't consider myself successful. I find that distracting. Because the second you think you're successful, you'll tend to set too big a goal in too short a time frame. You'll tend to have a little bit more adrenaline than you need, and you'll start to take risks that are foolish. But the second you are a man on a mission or a woman on a mission and focus on your mission of service in sustainable fair exchange, and not label yourself, because if you're thinking about your success, you're thinking about yourself, not your customer. That's the very important thing to make a distinction about. Now, I found out years ago, and this was a gem. I found out that when I first got married, first few years, when I would have a big day in my office and I would knock it out of the ballpark and think, wow, I'm amazing. Oh, touch me and you'll be healed or something, right? And I really was talking myself up. I noticed when I came home, she nailed me, and she just popped my pimple and brought me back down into reality. And I was under the illusion that the purpose of marriage was happiness. I realized the purpose of marriage is to make sure you learn how to be authentic and to open your heart and to maintain equanimity and equity. There's a big difference, not the hedonistic pursuit of a fantasy. So when I also noticed that when I was having a really down day, she was lifting me up and saying, hey, you're not that bad of a ASS, right? Kind of thing. You're not that bad. So she was lifting me up, and I was thinking, was this toxic, or is this, it got a meaning to it? So I noticed that if I was stable and had just a gratitude day, she was grateful. And I was watching this dynamic going on in my relationship. So I created a little system in place. I did not leave my office until I went through a checklist. And the checklist was, if I'm feeling up and I think I did amazing today, whose names did I forget? What staff member did I not thank? What procedure did I overlook? And I calm myself down, because if you don't govern yourself, the world around you has to. That's an important. If you don't let your physiology and intuition govern you, sociology and theology will come in, which is politics and religions will be sitting there with moralities around you and controlling you. So I basically said, I calmed myself down from my highs. I lifted myself from the lows, and I didn't leave my office until I had a tear of gratitude, which was a sign of authenticity. And when I came home, I had a loving wife waiting for me. And that's gold, because I realized because the moment I realized that I was appreciating my family, I was appreciating my customer, my staff, and myself equally, and I had equity theory, my business was most stable and it grew the most. But the second I gyrated with how great I am and minimize staff or minimize family or minimize anything else, probably before the fall, and the volatilities were going up. So the addiction for pride, the addiction for fantasies, the addiction for quick riches, the addiction for being in the limelight causes volatilities. Bipolar condition is a byproduct of monopolar addiction. The second we embrace both sides simultaneously, as Wilhelm Wundt, father of experimental psychology, said, we stabilize ourselves and we maximize our potential.
Wow. Everyone must, in the future, go back and listen to what he just said. So many gems of wisdom there. You know, watching people build businesses and doing it myself, and knowing logically what you say and what I know to be true, and then playing it out, and, you know, learning to be a master of yourself is falling down, getting up, falling down, getting up, and learning these things over time. Having that stability has been something to me that I see changing the way that I pursue goals. And, you know, instead of them being so success driven, it's a different quality of being values driven and feeling more fulfilled through things differently than when I had such a big void on money. It was like, I'm on food stamps, then my main mission is to be successful with money, because it was such a powerful void. Will you talk a little bit about that drive? Like, what, you know, if we're addicted to the drive of success and we take that away, I know a lot of people fear that. They fear the loss of the drive. So will you talk about that a little bit for entrepreneurs?
Yeah, there's a very important distinction. The way the brain is set up, it's done in sort of layers. And the most advanced part of the brain is the prefrontal cortex. It's called the executive center. It's where we have self-governance, self-mastery, where we're more objective and we're less emotional, less volatile. It's a systems two thinking, where we think before we react. And then we have below that the subcortical areas called the amygdala and down into the hindbrain, which are for survival. And we react before we think, because if a tiger is about to eat us, we need to. So if we're going through and we're living in survival mode, we're going to emotionally react with impulses and instincts, which are distractions from a mission. And they want immediate gratification because they got to accelerate to capture that prey, and they need to accelerate to get rid of that predator. So we tend to distort our reality and create false attribution biases, and we distort reality to such a degree that we aren't grounded. And so there's a difference between fantasies, goals, and true objectives. The executive center is trying to transform fantasies into true objectives, because true objectives are obtainable and fantasies aren't. A fantasy, let me use an example of a relationship to get this across. When you meet somebody and you're infatuated with them, you're conscious of the upsides, unconscious of the downsides, and you have a fantasy that there's going to be more benefits than drawbacks by being with this person. And you're elated and you have this mad passion for them. And then a day, a week, a month, a year, you start to calm that down and find out, oh my God, they have traits I didn't see. I'm now starting to be conscious of what was unconscious. And I start to see both sides of the individual. And you gradually learn how to love the individual, not infatuate with the individual. When you're infatuated, you're blind to the downsides. When you're in a fantasy mode in business as a goal, you're assuming there's going to be more positives and negatives, and you're blind to the downsides, and you're broadsided by them, and that's distressful and causes literally inflammatory responses in physiology. And so the reason why you're getting sideswiped is to try to let you know you're going after a fantasy, not your real objective, not your highest value. When you live by your highest value, your objective. When you live by lower values, you're into fantasies because you're unfulfilled. So you look for immediate gratification to compensate for it. But a goal is somewhere between that fantasy and an objective for most people. Most people have a fantasy. Well, when I get there, it's going to give me more advantages than not. But then when you get there, you find out, oh, there's things I didn't anticipate that I'm now having to deal with. Like buying a house. You thought, oh, I got finally my dream house. Oh yeah. Now I got to maintain the landscaping. Now I got to deal with the insects. Now I got to do security. Now I got to clean it, dust, furniture. It runs your life. So you eventually get to a point in life where you realize what a real objective is and what the forebrain is designed for. The forebrain is designed to mitigate the risks and to make sure you see both sides of things, that you're not learning by trial and error, you're learning by foresight. And that's the advanced part of the brain. And that's a real goal and objective. That means you're really mitigating the risks up front, thinking with foresight what they are with planning, and prepared for them so you don't have to react. You just follow a strategy. A strategy is designed to take fantasies into true objectives. And a strategy is using your memory and imagination to balance the equation, because the truth is no goal is going to be one-sided, just like no relationship is going to be one-sided.
It's amazing to. I always just so enjoy listening to you because it reminds me of all of the things that when you play out in real time and you go, oh, I can see in hindsight, looking at my business growth and people that I get to work with, when it is, when you're looking at this difference between fantasy versus goal versus objective. A lot of entrepreneurs step into business with the fantasy of, oh, I'm going to have time and money, freedom, and it sounds amazing and awesome. And they forget to go like, oh, wait, where is the actual strategy involved in this place where we go, what's the real objective here? Is it to serve people? Is it to fulfill my highest values? What is the actual objective? So when you help people move out of fantasy, to me, I think of this as a scale that you're talking about. It's like the scale between fantasy and objective, and somewhere in the middle is goal. Do you notice that as you move it higher and higher into your value system and you see objectives more powerfully from that executive centered place, do goals start to transform? How do you set goals? Like, what do goals turn into for you?
You don't get excited. I learned a long time ago by another gentleman who was pretty savvy in finance. He said, if you're excited, you screwed up. If it's boring, you're probably on track. And I don't mean boring, but I mean, if it's stable, you're on track. My wealth building has been stable, not exciting.
Yeah.
What's going on in this crypto craziness, which is a fantasy land, that's exciting and then devastating.
Yeah.
I'm not into excitement. I'm not into devastation. I'm into methodical, automated, strategic investments that's increased, and I became financially independent that way. So it's stable. Now, what's interesting is the way our brain is set up. Everything that's going on in our life is trying to get us authentic. Every symptom in a business, I hope everybody listens to this. Every symptom in your business is a feedback mechanism to guide you to authenticity. If you get cocky and swell yourself up and inflate yourself and get self-righteous and inflated and exaggerate how important you are, and you don't meet the needs of the customer or the staff or the spouse or whatever, they're going to let you know it by not buying, by reacting, and they're going to be your disowned parts to teach you that, and they're going to humble you. So all those symptoms are going to guide you to get back and make sure you're caring about your customer, caring about your employees, caring about your family, caring about the shareholders, etc. And they have to be equal. And if you minimize yourself altruistically, you'll sacrifice your profits and eventually go, I deserve more than that. And it's going to lift you back up. So every symptom in the business is trying to get you into equity and equanimity. Equity between you and others and equanimity within yourself. Because pride and shame are exaggerated and minimized personas. They're not you. And so every symptom that goes on in the business is the feedback to get you to be you, because the magnificence of who you are is far greater than any of those vacillations you have about yourself. So it's all about learning how to master yourself. That's why the mastery of business is the mastery of your own consciousness, your own life, your own spiritual path. There's no separation. That's why I wrote the book, How to Make One Hell of a Profit to Get to Heaven, because people have this idea that spirituality and materiality are somehow blocked or different. No, the mastery of wealth, the mastery of business, the mastery of material exchange and transaction is exactly the mastery of equanimity and being your true, authentic, inspired, actually highest priority individual, you. And the second you prioritize your life and delegate lower priority things and get into the executive center and get objective and make sure you're thinking of everybody. I have to share this story. There's a video that many people have probably seen on Bezos talking about Sony on a little video. It's just a 3-minute clip. If you haven't seen it, go watch it. And he's talking about the head of Sony decided to create, for the purpose of Sony, to make Japan great. It wasn't about making Sony great. It wasn't about trying to beat the market. It was about creating a new branding image for Japan instead of being copycats, which they had before, like China was. They want to be customer centric and raise a bearing standard for quality. Well, in order to do that, Jeff Bezos said, I'm going to be the standard bearer for customer focused efforts to make sure that the customer gets the greatest possible service. And he did. And Amazon became one of the great companies. But then recently, he was not doing the same thing for all the employees. And so the employees started reacting and giving him symptoms, and they got a Teamster union come in there to bring that back into balance. So now he's got the customers in balance. Now he's got the employees in balance. But then the stockholders are saying, well, wait a minute, now our profits are down a little bit because now you had to give more to the people there and everything else like that. So he has to find a way of doing that. So that meant that he redistributed some of the profits and brought those in there. And the second those were brought into balance, more wealth and more people buy from his company. It's almost like the universe rewards authenticity, equanimity within and equity without. So sustainable fair exchange is what the purpose of money is for. It's a way that bartering is inefficient, but money was designed to create a sustainable fair exchange so everybody could be grateful for their relationships with other people. It's a beautiful thing, financial that way.
Wow. Yes. I love how you talk about feedback systems and think about if we were conscious of alignment and authenticity, we're going to choose to look for the feedback system, right? Which is the symptom. So we go, okay, something in my business is out of alignment. Then I need to look within and go, okay, where am I prideful, resentful, fearful, infatuated? And then you can start to balance yourself out to magnetize more money your way in your business without that even being the aim. Really, the goal that I hear you saying over and over again is authenticity, right? Living within your highest values and bringing wealth to the world brings you wealth.
If you can't wait to get up in the morning and be of service to people, people can't wait to get your service.
Yes.
If your innermost dominant thought is your client, their innermost dominant thought becomes your business.
Yeah.
It's really quite simple. We make it complex, but that's the bottom line.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is people think they can fake it. People think they can get away with, being narcissistic. No, it eventually catches everybody. Your brand, your eternal brand is affected every time you try to waver from the center of authenticity.
So powerful. I could keep you here all day because I so appreciate chatting with you, and you've brought a lot of gems of wisdom. Thank you for being here. Will you share? I know that people are going to want to know where to find you. So will you share the best places to find you?
The easiest way to go and find me, if you just type in my name, it'll come up, or go to drdemartini.com. Just Demartini, as you see on the thing here, drdemartini.com. And you can spend the rest of your life. In fact, you'd almost have to be a Buddhist and believe in reincarnation, because you will probably not be able to keep up with everything that's on that website. There's a vast amount of educational material on there. And because we're putting it on there faster than people are able to keep up with it. But it's an education. It's there for you to be educated by. But go to the website. There's YouTube. There's all the social medias. There's live seminars, live webinars. There's everything there. If anybody wants to master the area of their life, that's what I'm dedicated to. For 50 years, I've been teaching now. And anything in any area of your life you don't empower, people overpower. So if you want to empower all those areas, and you think that you could learn something from what I'm saying here, come and join me. I'd love to help you empower yourself financially or in business or whatever. Anything that I can do to be of service to people, that's the most inspiring thing I get to do every day. I've delegated everything else. I don't have to do anything except teach, research, and write. And that's all I do.
Yeah, everyone here who has been here this whole time watching, and whoever gets to watch this in the future, if you didn't plug in at the beginning, you heard me share that Dr. Demartini was the main reason that I started to realize, I'm the center. I can change myself. I shifted my values from, being on food stamps and being impoverished, and realizing, I can actually become wealthy. Shifted my values towards wealth building, started building my business. I started autopilot savings, all the things he talked about today. And it has been the most valuable tools that I've learned have been from Dr. John Demartini. I talk about him all the time. So go check him out. Go to a breakthrough experience. For me, I'm trained in his values determination method, also the Demartini method. Like I've never found anything to date that is more potent and fast rapidly changing to living within your value system to where you can be authentic and do what you love to do in the world. I think of this as like, we talk about living in your highest values, living in your zone of genius. You're going to become a money magnet when you are living in that way because you're aligned with your highest values. So I could go on all day talking about how much you've helped me. So thank you so much for taking your time to be here. He's in England right now, so I'm sure it's getting late. And, thanks everyone for plugging in. Leave us comments. I'll answer them. And until next time, I'm wishing you all a lot of wealth, and I'm sending you NFA money making high fives. I'll see you again next Monday. Thanks for being here, Dr. Demartini.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.